Hey everyone, what's going on? I'm back talking about 35mm lenses for the Sony E Mount. Now, I'm a little bit late to the party with this brand here. I know a lot of you have already probably seen reviews out there. I just got them, big thanks to Alan Photo here in Singapore, but we're here to talk about Samyang's 35mm lineup, the 1.4, the 1.8, and the very tiny and light 2.8. Let's talk about them. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the Samyang 35 1.4 FE. Now this is mounted on this Sony A7R4 because I wanted to see how these lenses resolved using a 61 megapixel sensor, pushing them to their limits. A little bit of a hint, they do relatively well, but there are some things I have some concerns about. Anyway, let's talk about the 1.4. This is the big daddy. Coming in at 645 grams, got 11 elements, 9 groups, 2 spherical elements, 2 HR elements to it. 67 millimeters for the filter diameter on this as well. And yeah, it's a very simple lens. There's no aperture markings on it whatsoever. You got a red band as you have on all Samyang lenses. It is a very nondescript lens. Feels pretty well made, I have to say, for third-party lenses. I've heard some people say they feel a bit plasticky. I don't feel this with the 35 1.4 at all. It feels very robust. Now, in terms of performance, this is where I love this lens and I'm a little bit unhappy with this lens. Reason being, the image quality out of this lens at 1.4 is beautiful. I love the bokeh that comes out of this. Great separation from your subject to the background. Nice character to the bokeh. I like character to my bokeh on my images. However, the autofocusing with this lens and this camera body isn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be. Now, I don't know if there's a firmware update for the lens. I don't know if Samyang will even come out with that. Or maybe it's just the A7R4, but I felt that I was missing some shots and I was not rushing, I was taking my time, but I felt I was missing more shots than I should be. Even at 1.4, stopping down to f2, 2.8, f4, I was still missing some shots. So that's my only gripe with this lens. Besides that, for photography, this is a very sharp lens. I really like the images coming out of it. And for the price point, it's really hard to say no to this lens at a 35 1.4. Yes, it is quite hefty. I mean, it works well on, let's say, an A7R4, A7R3, A7 III for that matter. If you compare this to an A7C, you might find this lens to be a little bit big. You might want to look at these other two here. But if you've got more of a kind of a professional mirrorless design to your camera like this and other Sony cameras out there, I think you're gonna really enjoy this lens. Anyway, we're gonna do a whole Lightroom section in this review in just a bit. I'll take you through all the images I shot with these three lenses, but these are just overviews of the lens before we get into that. Next up, let's talk about the 35 f1.8. All right, next we're gonna talk about probably my favorite lens of the three right here, because it just has, it's the sweet spot of all of them. This is the 35 f1.8. One of the things I love about this lens is it focuses much faster than the 1.4. And again, like all the other Samyang lenses, it's very sharp, great image quality, and it's very, very light. I mean, this is like 200 plus grams. This feels like nothing on the camera. So if you are looking at the A7C, for example, or a Sony A6000 series, you're going to like this lens. It really is very nondescript, easy to carry around, but the image quality is fantastic. So you also have a custom mode switch on this, mode 1, mode 2, which is different from the 35 1.4. But overall, I gotta tell you, I really like this lens. Now, the filter diameter on this is 58 millimeters, so it's slightly smaller than the 35 1.4, but of course, that is a much bigger lens. There's a lot more glass in that. Also inside of this, you got 10 elements, 8 groups, okay? And you have up from f1.8 up to f22 maximum on the aperture. Overall, I like this lens a lot. Now let's move on to the little baby lens, the little baby 35 of them all. It feels like a toy, but it performs really well. We'll be talking about the 35 f2.8. Now moving on to the third and final lens, the featherweight of the group, the lightest of the lightest. This is the Samyang 35 f2.8 FE lens, coming in at 85.6 grams. I have held lens hoods heavier than this. It is that light. On the Sony A7R4, I feel like I'm just holding up the camera body. This has a very plastic feel to the lens. Of course, It is 85 plus grams, so don't expect metal on this. f2.8 to f22 on the aperture, 7 elements, 6 groups, 49 millimeters for the filter thread on the front of this as well. You get 2 spherical elements. So, you know, when you look at the specs on paper, you think, wow, Samyang's packing a pretty big punch on this. But when you shoot with this, you notice the image quality isn't the same, of course, as the 35.1.4 and the 35.1.8. You are noticing some, you know, some chromatic aberration, some green fringing here and there when you're shooting these sort of shiny objects. So I look at this as a fun lens. Now, let's say you have a Sony A7C, a Sony A6000 series, and you want a very light lens to take with you. This might be an option for you. Now, of course, I would compare this to, let's say, the 35 f2.8 from Tamron. I think that lens best this one, if I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, if you're on a budget, you need something to take some decent photos with. You're gonna get some good images out of this. Again, I'm comparing it to the best of their lineup and to the lenses out there, so I will be a little bit more critical. But do take note, this is a plastic build quality, so watch it, don't drop it around too bit, because if you do crack it, that's pretty much it for the lens, you know what I mean? Not to say that it's gonna break like that easily, but you know what I mean? I like a lens with a little bit more metal material to a little bit more robust feel. And this f2.8, as small, as compact, as cute as it is, I wouldn't wanna bang it around too much, if you know what I mean. Now anyway, we're gonna go to Lightroom right now, take a look at images from these 3 lenses, show you a little bit of a video test in just a bit, and my final thoughts right after that. All right, guys, we're now in Lightroom taking a look at images from the Samyang 35 1.4, 1.8, and 2.8. Let's kick it off with the 1.4. I liked this lens a lot. You know, I like fast aperture lenses. I always like 1.4s and 1.2s because I find them to be the most versatile. But the 1.8 is a very, I think that's the best all around out of the 3. Case in point, because I did have some focusing issues with the 1.4. It could have been my copy, it could have been the camera. I was using the Sony A7R4 as I mentioned. But there was times I was missing focus. It seemed to be a little bit slower than the third-party lenses for Sony and even Sony's own lenses. So again, I don't know if it's a firmware update, but it wasn't a deal breaker. It was just something I had to take note of. But anyway, let's take a look at some images. Here's a classic Triumph motorcycle. Love this bike. Love the image out of it. Very sharp. Focus on the Triumph word right here. Now, this is with 61 megapixels, very large image, coming at 123 megabytes. And this lens performs beautifully on the A7R4. Okay, now let me show you what it was before edit, after edit, before edit, after it. It was pretty bright that day, so I kind of, you know, wanted to shoot at 1.4. I could have cranked the shutter speed up a little bit more. I was at 1,250th of a second, but overall happy with the image. And I love the detail out of it. Here's another classic motorcycle. This is a BSA, if I remember correctly. Of course, it's been tweaked a little bit. It made its own, but look at the detail here on this motorcycle. Really happy. Got to give it a moment for the image to load up because this is a large file. You can see, look at the detail here on the tank and the license plate and all through the girder forks. Absolutely fantastic. This is, of course, after edit. Here's before edit. After it. One more of the kind of that vintage vibe to this, kind of give it a little bit of that Kodachrome look. So like how it overall turned out. Then let's go into a classic Corvette. We're in Singapore, so to get a car like this in Singapore is very rare. I was actually at this place called the Garage Mahal, which is this gentleman from Australia. He and his wife, they own it. They kind of built this kind of classic vintage garage outside of their home with a lot of these great cars, and I just had to capture some images here. Now, this is one of the instances where I wasn't nailing focus. I was aiming for the steering wheel, and I was getting, you know, over here, which is not exactly where I want. I want it right here in the center of the steering column, but it is what it is. And that was one of the things that sort of did frustrate me with this lens, because my focusing was, you know, according to the EVF, it was spot on. This nailed focus really well here on the headlights. Look at this. When it nails focus, it's a very sharp lens. I love the fall off here. See a little bit of the cat eye here in terms of the bokeh. Doesn't really bother me. Some people, they have a preference to one way or the other, but I like a little character in my bokeh, especially when you're shooting, you know, vintage things like this. It just sort of adds to all of that. Let's move on to something a little bit more modern. Here is the Porsche Taycan 4S. I was actually doing a photo shoot with it, so we were kind of doing vintage with modern. And this, of course, was after edit. Here's before edit. So it was quite dark at night, and I just sort of wanted to bring out some of the details. And you can do a lot of that with the A7R4 because the dynamic range is pretty good. ISO 100, f1.4, 1/40th of a second.
And yeah, really happy with the overall look of this. Again, if you want to look at the bokeh on this, seeing some circles right here, some cat eyes here and there. It's, you know, I mean, it's not going to be 100% circles, but you know, again, too perfect a bokeh just makes it look very non-characteristic. It just makes it look blah. That's my personal opinion, at least. Everyone will have a different opinion. Okay, let's move on to another lens. Let's move on to the 2.8. And the reason is the 2.8 is a very small, very lightweight lens. It is made of plastic, and you might think, well, will it perform relatively well? Actually, it's not bad. Kind of do like a pseudo macro shot here. And this is a 35 f2.8, 1/3200ths of a second, ISO 8000, okay? Was cranking it up a little bit to see how it performed. Not bad at all. What else here? This is with the 2.8, one of the super trees. This is bright daylight, ISO 100, f9, 1/400ths of a second, because I wanted to really capture the sharpness around the edges to see how this tiny little lens performed when you stop down, because usually these lenses will perform beautifully stop down. As you can see, the detail, even in the edges, it's softening up right around here, but you really got to get to the edges to see any sort of softening. This is impressive for this little pancake lens. I wasn't expecting it, you know, so yeah, I mean, obviously, are there other better 35 f2.8s? I would say the Tamron might be slightly better than this, but for the price point and for the size, I mean, this is kind of impressive. I gotta say, I was a little taken back by it, but you will get a little bit of that green fringing. Case in point, I was shooting this 35 1.8 here. This is before correction. You will see a little bit of that green fringing if you move in on here, this area right here. So you got to take note of that. It's not a deal breaker, but you know, some lenses have this, some lenses don't. So again, price point, performance, I'm not going to complain too bad on that. Here's just some more other close-ups of the palm tree right here, 35 1.4 lens. We want to stop it down just to get everything in focus. Just a little bit more artsy, something a little bit different on that. Here's my friends, if you're into road cycles, this is the S-Works Athos, the new one, the ultralight one. He just got this, so we took out the 35 1.4 for this. Again, you know, this was how it was straight out of camera. The bike's color looks more like this in person. This is unfortunately got to deal with Sony's color science, where it's a little bit hit and miss, especially with these gradient sort of prism colors. So I tried my best to replicate what I saw in person, but overall did a good job. Very happy with how that turned out. Here is with the 35 1.8. We were shooting at nighttime. We were down by these very old homes in this older part of Singapore. And they would have these little temples inside of their, I would say, garages. Very interesting. And I just want to capture some of these moments. This is before edit, after edit. So I did really do some brightening up here on the signs, bring out the yellows and the reds and the blues. Yeah, very, very cool. This is me. We were early in the morning, about 6 a.m., 1.8. It's a selfie shot inside of the side mirror of a worker's truck. And we can't go without a cat shot here and there. Not 100% in focus, but I did what I could with her. This is at f1.8, 1/25th of a second, ISO 2500. Not really pin sharp, but it's more the feel than anything else. And there you have it. So overall, these Samyang lenses really do perform relatively well, especially for the price point and what you're getting with them. So don't discount because of third party or because of the build quality. You got to take them for a test drive. I think you're going to really be happy with what you see here coming out of them. I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting much, to be honest with you. And I walked away out of this review saying, you know what? These are not bad at all. And I would definitely recommend them for someone, especially who's on a budget and wants something different than what Sony's offering or what other third-party manufacturers are offering at a different price point. The Samyang might be the way to go. All right, guys. Now to my final thoughts on these three lenses.
Don't think I was going to forget about you video people out there. So here's a quick video test with the 35 f1.8 on Jay's A6300. So we're just going to walk around, just see how it tracks me. Now, you're probably noticing the colors are a little bit more vibrant coming out of this lens. And that's one of the things you might like or might dislike. Teach their own on that. I personally don't mind a little bit more color pop coming out of my lenses, but if you want more of a flatter profile, you might need to shoot in log or maybe try another option out there. But nonetheless, it does a relatively decent job in terms of focusing. doesn't lose me too much. Again, we're not using the latest autofocusing system on any Sony camera right now. That would go to the a7S III, which I don't have with me right now. I wish I did, but I think as you're seeing right now, it's pretty decent. Anyway, we'll also try the 35 f2.8 so you get a little feel of the differences between the two lenses. Now we're testing out the 35 f2.8 with video on the Sony a6300. As you can tell, a little less bokeh, but it's okay. I'm in focus, right, Jay? All right, now I'm gonna move around a little bit. If you're noticing these stains right here, this is called sweat. It is very hot in Singapore today. Just one of those days, that's how it is. That's usually why I wear black shirts on this show, is to cover up the sweat stains. But I do get a lot of questions from you guys. I'm just sort of rambling right now so you can test the video quality. Why I'm not wearing a mask? Well, it's because when I'm filming, I don't wear a mask. We don't have to do that here in Singapore. And as you can tell, there's nobody around me. Jay, pan around. Show them where. Nobody around me at all, just trees and Jay, who's about 1.5 meters away from me. So we are safe distance in effect. It's happening right now. But overall, the lens does a decent job. Again, I know I'm in bright sunlight. Show it it's okay, Jay. Show that I'm in bright sunlight. It's a little bit harsh. You know, not everybody's a perfect cinematographer like yourself. But I'm just kind of showing everybody the extremes from bright to shade. Now, let's get a little bokeh in our lives with the 35 1.4. So now we're filming on the 35 1.4. I'm gonna give you my conclusions on all of these three lenses. Now, I'm not comparing the Samyang lenses as to, let's say, the G Master lenses out there. These are third-party lenses that are coming out at a very affordable price. So I'm talking about them more in terms of layman's terms. And overall, these lenses perform relatively well. For what they're priced at, they perform well. The 35 1.4, as you can see for video, it looks good. Great background separation. I look good in the image, hopefully. Can't see myself, but Jay seems to be saying I'm looking okay. And that's the most important. Here's the thing, guys. I could really nitpick and talk about edge-to-edge sharpness, and I could talk about different diffractions here and there, but we don't shoot that way. Okay, we look at the subject that we're taking a photo of or a video of, and we're concentrating on that. And if that person or that subject catches the viewer's eye, that's the most important thing, and that's what you want out of a lens. Something that can grab the subject that you want to shoot or capture and make it your own and make it pop. And that's what these lenses, they do well. I will say that the 1.4 autofocusing for video, for photography is a little bit slow. If you're okay with that, I definitely recommend it. The 1.8 for me is the sweet spot between all three lenses. Decent price point, good enough for the aperture, and it's fast for autofocusing, and I really like it, especially for the weight and the price. Anyway, those are my thoughts on these three Samyang lenses. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Be safe out there, and we'll chat to you soon. Take care.